Good evening, everyone. We are here for our fiscal year 24 budget. And so I will be going through what you have there in front of you. You will have the draft packets there in front of you, hard copies. I'm also going to be leaning heavily on my team who we've gone through this, and you'll see the timeline. You just saw my sheet of the blue and the red in the other meeting. So we'll be going through this, and I will defer to some of my leads, cabinet members of those departments to explain if you have some questions as we go through this. So sticking with our theme, hashtag transforming and performing. So this is our budget timeline starting back in September with our enrollment data. Moving October, the priorities are established through the online survey, and so we sent that out to our community members soliciting feedback as to what they would like to see, the areas where our budget can be dispersed. Last month, November, we had a board meeting and we went over those budget projections, the expenditures, and the requests from schools. And then now we are here. It's to the board members and the community as a first reading. It will then progress next month, second reading. We'll have a work session to discuss if you have any questions from tonight into January to bring back to us for any further discussion. February will be the vote, and as that third reader, the vote. March, it will be presented to the county council. May, the county council will introduce the fiscal year 24 budget in the public hearing, and then June, it will receive the final appropriation and the revisions for fiscal year 24 budget. So here are those results from the survey and our solicitation from our community members as to where their priorities lie. And you could see there the top three: increasing salary for recruitment and retention. Second priority, maintaining lower class sizes. And the third, increasing security measures at our schools. And then it progresses down from there. Here are our demographics. We have 10 students less than last year. Our total enrollment, 4,523 as of September 30th. You could see the breakdown by ethnicity and race, our number of students in each, as well as the percentages. And then on the right side, our services and programs and how it's broken down again, number of students and the percentages. So I'm sure this is not new to you, maybe to some of the new board members, but this is our blueprint and the 5 pillars. Blueprint for Maryland's future, broken down, and you'll hear a little bit more about the updates. We do have a cadence of giving you information every month on the blueprint and where we are. But this evening, you'll see how the blueprint impacts our budget and the dollars that we're spending that are going to and that are associated with the blueprint and what pillars specifically. And so here we are. So the increases for our fiscal year 24 budget: Pillar 1, early childhood education, and that's with the accreditation of pre-K classes. And you can see the dollar amounts that are attached there. We do meet weekly to talk about the updates, what we're getting from the state, from our blueprint coordinator, Ms. Tillman, and we're constantly talking about how we can implement the action items that are under the pillars and how we can still be fiscally responsible and transparent in doing those activities. Pillar 2, high quality and diverse teachers and leaders. So the salary increase must reach $60,000 by fiscal year 2027, and you could see the price tag associated with that. Also under Pillar 2 comes more professional development for our staff, our recruitment efforts that we will be increasing and thinking of ways that we can recruit and probably more importantly retain staff members that we get. National board certification, the registration fees and the costs associated with it. Pillar 3, college and career readiness, the career counseling with the Workforce Development Board, our dual enrollment for secondary students, advanced placement, and then under Pillar 4, more resources for student success, and that's by way of our media area, media specialists, ESL, special ed, reading intervention positions, and our TSI tutors. So that's just an overview of, so you could see when we go through the budget in the different 12 categories, increasing amounts, where some of those amounts are coming from.
Would you like us to ask questions as you go or hold them
Yes,
for the
that'd
end?
be great.
Okay. I have a question about the media specialists.
Yes.
Are we leaning in on hiring more degreed media specialists, or are those IA positions as they have been?
Yes. It's on our list
It's
of
done?
media specialists.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yep. So we have here, I think that should be probably 2.8 million, around 2.8 million. And that's the amount of the cost of our negotiations. And so our staff received that one step and a COLA. And so later on this evening, we'll have that as an agenda item of that successful negotiated agreement. And so here are the additional, the list of the additional staff that we are requesting for this fiscal year 24. And you could see the list there. Special ed at the top, both teachers and IAs. The 18 to 21 programs there, which we only pay a third of that. We share with 2 other counties. Reading specialists, 1 ESL teacher, a construction project manager, and that is with the chapel project for that. Again, special ed placement coordinator and a mentor, and then Ms. Jackson, as you just mentioned, the media specialists there at the bottom, and the amount there also at the bottom. And so as we go, you'll see the different categories as well as the amount listed there on the slides. So there are 12 categories, and so this is an example of what the slides will look like, and we will go through the different categories, with the first being administration, and then you could see on the yellow Post-it note there the activities and things that are associated with that category of administration. And so for that category, you could see the expenditures, the different categories underneath that main administration label: salaries, contracted services, supplies, materials, other charges, land, building, and equipment. And so for every category, it breaks down even further into more specific categories of what those entail. Also, what you see, the columns, you see what actually was spent in fiscal year 22, what was approved for fiscal year 23, which we're in right now, and then what the request is this evening going into fiscal year 24. And then that last column is the change, as well as it's highlighted at the bottom in the blue for that change as well. Category 2, so you saw the first was administration. Category 2 is mid-level administration, and so you could see the examples of who fits into that category. And then the next slide, you'll see those same categories on the side as far as salaries, contracted services, and it goes on, and that's how every category is listed. What you're looking at and you have are those detailed behind that first category page and the breakdown of those items.
Dr. Pepakai,
Yes.
Just a curiosity that supplies and materials went down considering the inflation rate. Is there, Ms. Jones?
Did a little bit of reorganizing between mid-level administration and administration. We had a really modest budget in mid-level administration for our communications team, and the reason that supplies and material went down is we moved any cost related to media relations, communications from mid-level administration up to administration. You saw there was an increase in administration when we just went through that. That's one of the reasons, is we actually sort of put together an actual budget for the communications team for the first time.
Thank you.
I have a question about salary and wages for both category 1 and 2. The requested change is very small. What kind of, I know that's not part of our negotiated agreement. Are we giving a raise or a COLA or anything to our
Support staff?
To our admin level staff, who I know work incredibly hard as well?
Oh, you're saying for the administrators?
Yes.
Absolutely. They those are included throughout every category. So every category gets what is we're going to be talking about in the negotiated agreement tonight, but there are always retirements, In category 2, for example, there was a retirement or two, of some senior level folks. There's shifting of personnel, and when that happens, sometimes you end up with some savings that offset any increase based on the COLA or STEP or whatever that we're giving. But every employee receives an increase.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions with mid-level administration? Okay. So the next category is instructional salaries. You could see there what it's related to: teachers, IAs, substitutes, extra pay for extra duty. And the page associated with that. And so you could see the majority of that are salaries for that change. Okay, category 4, materials of instruction. So these are supplies, textbooks, classroom supplies, and the costs associated with that and the change are there on the supplies and materials. And some of this is contributed to, and Dr. Einhorn, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe with that pillar of some resources that we have.
Request in this area includes, if you'll recall, we had moved some instructional materials to grants. As those are expiring, I had shared with the board earlier that we would then see some of those moving back into our costs here. In addition, through our science of reading training, we've identified that we need some tier 2 interventions that we've not had previously, so that's included here as well.
Also, there are dual enrollment textbooks in here of over $100,000, and we'll talk. Dual enrollment is a requirement of the blueprint that has a pretty big impact on this FY24 budget. The impact in this category is on the actual textbooks that we will be required to provide to our students.
These are the student, that particular thing is for the students' college part, correct?
Correct. Mm-hmm. So we've done the work to figure out, we've come up with an estimate of how many courses we think our students might take. Dual enrollment is now open to all secondary students, not just 11th and 12th grade students. And next year we'll be required to provide tuition, textbooks, transportation. It comes with a big price tag for us next year, and it's a big impact on this budget.
And so we've been in constant communication with Chesapeake College and other institutions. We'll be creating an MOU so we can make sure that we're clear on what we're doing, what they're doing, and have that mutual agreement. So,
can I jump back really quick? Something just sticks out at me.
Yep.
This change of dropping $42,241 for after-school stipends. It's on page 18, if that helps. Are we offering less after-school programming? I know there was a problem finding people to staff it. Is the problem that we're not offering enough of a stipend to staff it? Are we losing all our after-school programming?
No, and I think they're prevalent in our elementary schools more so than high school. And we have talked about that, and I don't think it's the cost, but still, again, finding staff to do that. But it's still on the table, because when we had our initial meetings when schools came and provided their lists of talking about that, and I know you had mentioned it before, so.
I would be curious in your roundtable discussions with staff if they would volunteer to do it more if it paid better. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's not something we can solve in this budget cycle, but if it was more financially lucrative for them, they're good opportunities for our kids and,
right.
and important for our students. So I want to make sure we're offering them, but I don't want to put too much on a teacher's plate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, category 5, other instructional costs. And so these are not personnel, they're classroom, technological equipment, contracted services, and professional learning. That is the change there, the bulk of that being contractual services. Some of these as well, and going through this is looking at some of the things required by COMAR, and that is outdoor experiences for students, making sure that we do those things. You could see there's a change there. Also, the contracted services, you could see there the list on page 24 as well. On 25, you saw on the very first page when I had the list of the blueprint price tags, and you could see there on 25 where it's listed in fiscal year 24, partnering with the Workforce Development Board to provide career counseling. And so there was that amount on that first page for a blueprint, because that is under our Pillar 3 for our blueprint and the work that's going to be done there.
Where does a program such as It's Academic fall in there? Is that a non-contracted after-school program?
It's academic.
It's a stipend. It's included in our instructional budget, extra pay for extra duty for extra pay.
Under this category also is the work that we do with our new teachers, which is very important in making sure that they have what they need professionally, and that we're continue to support them as they come on board with us.
Sorry, another question.
Yes.
Tutoring, which is expensive, but also very worth it. As we know, the data shows it's really important. That was covered in ESSER funding, correct? Is that no longer covered through ESSER, or will we get those funds?
Well, there's a couple things going on there. We have gotten for several years, even in the early years of Blueprint funding, we used to get restricted grants called Transitional Supplemental Instruction, and it's designed for small group tutoring, grades K through 3. We've had other tutoring grants as well that Dr. Einhorn's going to talk about tonight, actually. But one of the pockets of funding that we will be getting for next year as part of our state aid is a pocket of funding called Transitional Supplemental Instruction, and I'm estimating it's going to be $450,000 plus. So we need to make sure we're using that money to deliver tutoring. So in this budget, we have positions related to that, reading interventionist, and we also have some contracted services, which is what you're seeing in other instructional costs, that $200,000 line item. We've been using tutors that we've contracted with to come in through the day right now. That's how we're delivering it. But given this amount of money, we think we thought it would be important to hire reading interventionists to be doing that tutoring as well.
Will that be restricted to K through 3, or? Okay.
That pocket of money is, but that's not to say we aren't doing other tutoring with other money. So, for example, I think Dr. Einhorn was thinking about using some of the ESSER money for other grades, bands.
Okay.
Also, the other one thing, and I think it's in this, other charges, part of that increase is, I think that's where our dual enrollment tuition is.
Mm-hmm. It is.
So that was a big increase, and again, that's mandated to begin next year.
And you can see there the offering up to 60 credits for students, secondary students.
And the contracted services, is that where the Workforce Development Board, I think? Under contracted services,
Yeah,
that big
for
increase,
counseling.
part of that, how much is that, 280?
280.
281,000. We also are mandated next year to spend about $281,000 on career counseling for our students. So we're supposed to do that through our local Workforce Development Board.
May I ask how that's going to work, or would you like to come back to us another?
We're in discussions, very, very, very early discussions with them. I think what a lot of counties are finding, like we're finding, is that they're very small, a couple people on staff on these boards, and so they were taken a little surprised, at this, and so we're working through it, and we'll come up with a solution of what that might look like.
Lots of questions. Yes, we come together weekly with lots of questions. So, Category 6, special education. And you could see there the Post-it note what that entails and includes and the costs that are incurred under that. And if you remember back on the first page of our additional staffing, and so you saw where we have additional staffing in the special ed arena. Just some notes that I have here regarding this category. And just what I've seen, aside from the notes, the inclusion models that we have in our schools lend themselves, number one, to requiring more staff because our needs are surpassing what we have data-wise, as well as the human capital we have in the rooms that are working with students. Our county district is well above the state average for caseload, almost twice the average. It's not feasible for one person to do that. Same with the instructional assistants that we have for special ed and the special ed mentor. So we've added on that list teacher, instructional assistants, and a mentor to provide support to those new teachers that are in those classrooms. And that's one thing that I will be looking at, intending to making sure that we are attending to the core in the classroom so that, you know, it's what's happening in the classroom is inclusionary versus, you know, pulling out often. As well as I'm trying to look at other notes here. Additional teacher at St. Michael's Middle High School. This will allow 3 full-time teachers at St. Michael's Elementary School to provide special ed services to approximately 31 students across pre-K through 5th. 4 full-time teachers to provide special ed services to approximately 38 students at St. Michael's Middle High across 6th through 12th grades, and 1 teacher in each building to provide services to students who require more intensive supports. Again, I'm looking at autism, significant developmental disabilities, intellectual disabilities, Easton Elementary. There is an increase there for our numbers. So again, all of this is to say, you know, matching what we asked for, 3 special ed teachers, 1 special ed, or 6, I'm sorry, special ed IAs, and 1 special ed mentor speaks to the increase that you see here in this area.
It feels low to me.
Still low?
To deal with the increase, yeah. Knowing, I mean, the numbers that you just gave out were the highest, you know, in the state, and in double some other people's caseload. Like that's,
yeah.
That screams more than 3 teachers to me. And something that came up the last time we talked about special ed is that I'd be really curious to know about hours versus students, and how we're meeting hours per building with our staff assignments, and maybe that will sort of illuminate the need a little more broadly than you know, per student number. So this is something that I think personally I'd like to put a pin in and come back to you. Like, I'd like some more information about this. Yeah,
agreed, because I think what you find is that needs are greater. The needs are greater than just what you see being divided student from teacher to pupil ratios. And so the needs surpass that. And so I agree. I think this is something, you know, I would love to put more staff there. I think that's something that the teaching and learning department, I know, has a highlight on. So we'll be looking at that and seeing the models, more importantly, that are happening.
And in the last time we talked about budget, I think it was last month, it all kind of blurs together. I had suggested just increasing our IA population in general, and that, I mean, to me, that could go under special ed, or it could go under sort of just general teaching positions. But I think it could be helpful in meeting some of those hours, and just people, you know, human capital, like you said.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that the instructional assistants that were in our media specialists too, instead of just getting rid of them, we are circulating them back into different roles through the system.
Awesome.
I have a question about inclusion.
Yes.
I know you said that looking to move more toward more inclusion in the classroom. Will there be outreach supports for what that looks like for students, for teachers in classrooms, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it is a need, and looking at the best research-based model that's out there now. I've I'm familiar with a couple, but working, I know, with Dr. Einhorn and her team, we'll look at what are the practices now and then what we can add to. Because with all of our new teachers that are coming in that area, I think are going to need support for the needs that we're seeing.
Thank you.
And now that we have new figures, I think Easton Elementary is 47% Hispanic. Is there anywhere in the budget to incentivize for Spanish speaking, Spanish language classes for teachers, IAs, et cetera?
Yeah,
I don't want to upset the budget, but this is a reality point.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I know that was on our list as well. And those are the conversations we're having of prioritizing, what staff we're putting where and how many we can add in our budget cycle. Dr. Einhorn, if you wanted to add anything.
We do currently offer for our teachers a Spanish for Educator course that is taught by Mr. Hilliard, and we yearly fill that course with our teachers who want to begin to learn to speak Spanish and interact with their students better. So that is one thing we currently have in place. As regards the need for special education, we do try to manage what our needs are as well as to be fiscally responsible for what would fit within a budget. In the special education realm, there is always need. We meet the requirements for students, but one of the things that is important is to have an effective co-teaching model. So in looking at a school like St. Michael's Middle High School, their caseloads may be relatively small, but those teachers are co-teaching in multiple content areas and planning with different teachers at different grade levels. So that's why sometimes the staffing in those schools has to look a little bit different. It's not just the number of students they're servicing, but where those hours of service are in the least restrictive environment in a co-taught classroom.
Category 7, Pupil Personnel Services. So this is the items dealing with mental health professionals, pupil personnel workers, school social workers, materials, and supplies. And so under here, we're looking at school resource officers, which are being picked up. The cost of that is being picked up by the Sheriff's Department. So, and so there will be an additional, there you could see there on page 36, that line item there, and that's why you have that decrease. Under here, you also have some memberships for our counselors, and again, making sure that we continue to support and equip our social workers and our counselors that are out here supporting our students and our staff.
Do we have are we losing a position, a mental health professional position, or what is what amounts to the decrease of $54,000?
What page are you referring to?
5, first line.
Mental health professionals. Let's see.
I can respond to
Yeah,
that.
I see.
That was a position we put in our budget, and it has never been filled. It's always been vacant. So a lot of the work that is overseen by Darlene Spurrier and the Pupil Personnel Service, all of her social workers are either in a grant of some type. We have a lot of grants that cover behavioral health and social workers, or their salaries are actually over in instructional salaries because that's a place they can be. And then we have this one not odd, but we had a behavioral health position. So we haven't actually lost a person. We have behavioral health specialists in special ed and in the general instructional salaries categories.
So this is a redundant position, we don't actually need it, or is this something we should consider keeping out there so in hope that we can hire somebody?
We haven't, I think we're staffed okay. We can always use more, but we have a good mix of social workers and personnel workers and behavioral health specialists and all of that. We made some additions to that last year. I think the concern will be going forward in FY25 or beyond. We have a lot of positions and grants, and so the assumption we made was that many of those grants have been continuing grants, and so we assumed that those were going to continue. But I know that's something that keeps Darlene from sleeping well at night sometimes. And many of them are multi-year grants. They're not all one-year grants, but some of them are one-year grants. So we're just hoping that we're going to be able to continue.
Okay, category 9, transportation. So you heard, I think it was last month, when we talked about the additional school buses needed. So that is moving forward, and that fits under this category. We also talk about, in this category too, and this will be continued conversations, that kind of matches with our dual enrollment and transportation of our students, after school programs, summer programs, dual enrollment now. And so, talking in closely to Mr. Schaefer about transportation of all the things that we're doing, and with our drivers, making sure we have enough drivers for the routes that we have. You can see there on 44, the change under vehicle fuel, oil, tires, just the upkeep of our own buses. And then on 46, what I mentioned, the 9 school buses and that amount.
Is that to replace existing school buses?
It is. We have a 15-year life, so we have 9 buses that are going out. It's the only bubble we have. After this, they're in pockets of 4 and 2 and 1 and 3.
I have a question about after-school transportation.
Yes.
I know this was a big thing for Michael, and it never really came to fruition. And so I'm going to take up the torch on that one. I would love to see a robust after-school transportation program, so that more kids can participate in these programs, which hopefully will be funded. Maybe not this year, might be next year. We might be setting the stage for future budget cycles. But it kind of blows my mind that we don't have after-school transportation for our athletes and our student activists and whoever is participating in whatever they're doing after school. But there's a line item in here for more money. We're asking for more. What is our plan? What are we spending this $40,000 on?
So
Funded programs, which line item?
Salary after school. This expense is for transportation following after school instruction.
Page 42.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I love it. If a kid has to stay after to make up work or work with a teacher or whatever, I think that they should have transportation home and not rely on having a parent pick them up. But
Well, I need to think about exactly where that's happening. Mr. Schaefer might be able to help me, but the $40,000, what happens a lot of times when we're developing the budget is it's so early in a school year. It's early in a school year, right? So a lot of times it's almost, you need to look at the actual full prior year. So you'll notice that the $40,000 that we've put in for next year's after school is exactly what we spent last year on after school. So I think when we developed a budget for this year, we didn't know that we were going to be spending quite that much money on after school programming last year, if that makes sense. As to where exactly that's happening, I don't know. I do know we provide transportation in St. Michael's for the SMASH program, and I'm not sure all of the other after-school programs.
okay, then maybe that's another follow-up. Could we get some more information about what that program looks like and if there's a future planned for this and expansion? Because again, I'm not sure 40,000 gets very far, but if it's the start of something, then I'm into it.
I think a first step too would be, a full audit of the number of programs we have, where they're located, what they're doing, to get that whole view as
Oh,
a starting
I
point.
completely agree.
And then we can move from there.
And I think about providing transportation for, like I said, those involved in clubs and sports, but also, expanding to those who do need additional help after school, and that takes a huge load off of parents. And so, yes, all of that.
Okay. Category 10, operation of plant. And you could see there our custodial services, grounds maintenance, routine building maintenance are under this category. Some decreases in some areas, some increases in others. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Schaefer, this is the area where our lawn keeping here over at district office is under this maintenance. Category 11 is our maintenance of plant, upkeep, improvement of buildings, fixed equipment, our vehicles, but not our buses. And you could see the different line items there.
I'm sorry, can we quickly go back to, I just have a question about something category 10. Mr. Schaefer, do we have to do this comprehensive facilities review? Is that required by the state yearly? Okay.
Category 11. You could forward to the next slide, please. Thanks. You can see the change there, and then behind there, the next pages that give you detail of those changes. There on 59, repairs for building and grounds. A couple of them are just flatlined with no change. And you can see under there also is our equipment, our desks, chairs, under this category. And then our final category are fixed charges. That's health, life insurance, retirement, other post-employment contributions, tuition reimbursement. Okay, next slide, please. So then this is the summary of all the categories that I just went through. Again, the actual, the approved, the requested, and then the change. And I know specifically for the new board members, next month we will be coming back, so you'll have time and we'll have a work session where more questions and any discussion that you have we'll be able to talk about. But that's an overview and a summary of the category. Next slide. Current expense fund, unrestricted. And then the next slide, local revenues, and you can see the list there. Our next slide covers our state revenues here before our capital improvements. State revenues. And some of the things that we've talked about, special ed, EL, our college career readiness, which ties again back to some of those items under those pillars for the blueprint, which we will continue to talk about and how we move forward with those items and fund those items.
The one thing I wanted to add on the revenue projections is that we don't have these officially from the state, and we won't have them until after our January board meeting. So this is our best estimate going through the legislative calculations. Some of them are a little more straightforward than others. Some of them involve, a lot of comparative wealth data and, how we stack up relatively to all the different counties across the state of Maryland. So, this is our best estimate. I'm sure it won't work out exactly this way. We're just,
I'm slow, so I was still kind of zipping through. I was back on insurance, health insurance.
back. Go back 3
Under
slides.
fixed charges.
Yeah.
Fixed charges. Go back. One more.
This
Yep.
is
One more and go forward one.
Yep.
page 65. So we are requesting 11,229,753. That's the health insurance, all employees.
Yes, so we anticipate a 5% increase in our premiums. We don't have a lot of information out of our partner, Bolton Partners, on this yet. We always work with them to try. We are basically self-insured, so we do, try to work with them. It's all based on our experience and how our plan year goes. So we put in a 5% increase, and then also factored in the additional positions and the impact they would have on both health insurance and everything else. The other, this category kind of goes hand in hand with any impact any changes we've made in salaries. So as salaries go up, our pension contributions go up, our all of our taxes go up, et cetera. Yeah, and then also something that seems like a big jump, but it's not really out of the norm for us. You know that a few years ago we started trying to fund our OPEB liability, other post-employment benefits, which is our our retiree health benefits. And so this year's budget doesn't have an amount for that, because when we were working on this year's budget and trying to get it down to a level that matched our appropriation, we realized we had some available funding in FY22, went to the county council and sort of prepaid the FY23 OPEB contribution. So we sort of skipped anything in our FY23 budget for these retiree health benefits, but it has been our practice. And I did bump it up because I am trying to get us a little better funded, but that's, that's totally discretionary how much we choose to put in OPEB.
For some reason, the figure 8% on the health insurance increase, I was floating through my mind. Do we have is that 5% a better figure? Do we think?
That was a very early number that Bolton Partners tossed out, but it typically, it goes through several cycles during our budgeting process, so I don't have anything better to hang my hat on. It could well be above 5%. You're right.
So you could forward to our capital improvements. We have a list there. Project description, what was approved, fiscal year 23 we're in now, and then requested for fiscal year 24 and the change. You can see there's 4 items for fiscal year 24.
Seems like there might be some math errors in the change column, so I apologize for that. I'll fix that next go around.
And so this slide speaks to our grant positions, which I know Dr. Einhorn was talking about briefly. Continuing into fiscal year 24, 69 positions are grant positions, and you can see the total that amounts to. This list is just a small example of those positions, but you have the more exhaustive list there in your book. And so it's constantly making sure we see when those grants sunset and prioritizing and talking about sustainability of those positions and the work that's being done behind those positions, which are all very important.
I have a question about the grants and then
Yes.
one about capital projects, but I'll start with the grants. In
Okay.
our budget a few years ago, we had put funding for a grants manager, and I saw the position posted for a bit, and then it just kind of petered out. Did we hire somebody to do that? Is there?
We did. We sort of changed the focus of the position. I think at one point, maybe when it was first discussed, it was more of a grant writer position and someone to obtain grants. And then COVID came, and we had so many grant opportunities thrown at us that we didn't really need to spend time pursuing as many grant opportunities. So, but what we really had a need for was someone to help our existing staff just oversee all of the administration related to grants. So we hired a grants administrator who works in my department. She works very closely with special ed because they get a lot of grants. And she also works with the folks in Dr. Einhorn's department who are grant managers and, just helps everybody stay on track. If you change what you want to do with the grant for whatever reason, you need to file. There's a lot of administrative steps. So that's what we hired.
Yeah, that position was born out of a conversation I think Dr. Einhorn and I had 4 years ago about how difficult it is to write a grant and then administer it afterwards, and that we're asking people, like Dr. Einhorn, I know writes for a lot of grants,
right.
And then asking people to do that above and beyond their normal job duties. But I also know that you can write the administrative fee into a grant often.
Do that.
And we do that, so that's great. So
that person is actually paid through
a
that
grant.
Yes.
So do we need more of those to maintain and get more grants? Because I'm sure there's grants that we're missing just because there are so many. Could we be well serviced by having more people doing that for us?
Well, that's something, too, that I think we'll look at this list to see. I mean, one just came out this week, I think, from the state, a new grant for next year. So that's something that we'll look at to see if the caseload, I mean, I do see, this week before December 1st, there's deadlines, January, there's deadlines, because once you get it, of course, you have to report out the outcomes and all that comes with it. So we'll definitely look at our list to see where we are and see if that is a need.
Okay. My second question about capital funds, was the chairs in the Easton High School auditorium. I know that's not ours. It's owned by the county. It's the county auditorium. But I think those are probably due for replacement.
So you said the chairs in Easton High School?
Auditorium, yes. And I don't know how one goes about replacing that if it's not our specific room or...
I'm going to try my mic. There it is. It's a good question. And it is the county's auditorium, but we do manage it. So we would probably have to submit a capital improvement within our budget to do that. It is aging. The seating could probably be addressed, in the next couple of years, I would say. Trying to prioritize all the different things, and with chapel on the horizon, I was trying to be conservative on our capital improvement projects, but I appreciate you mentioning that because that is something that we should probably look at.
Oh, you haven't heard me complain about the turf field yet, so we can talk about that if you want to talk about big money projects. I think that should be on here too. But yeah, I mean, I think any parent or community member who sat in those seats for more than 10 minutes would say, yeah, we probably should look at replacing them. I'd be curious the cost of nothing else.
The only other thing that I would add is I agree. There's lots of needs across the county in aging buildings. We would need to consider the timeline for renewal for Easton High School before we put any huge expenditures. I have no idea what auditorium seating would cost. It's probably not hugely substantial, but Easton High School is next up after chapel. I know that's some time out, though.
And you can see here this slide kind of is a summary of those major increases listed, and we could tag again some of these items to our blueprint, the amount, the fees associated with that, and the total.
Can I ask one little question? On the AP classes, I know, and I fully support it, and I know it's state mandated. Has the state mentioned anything about additional funding, considering we're providing next year transportation plus book fees, other fees for that?
Well,
Our per pupil funding goes up in every area, whether it's enough to really cover it.
I was just curious because we've had this issue, consideration before about state mandating but not funding. I fully support this program, but I was just wondering if this was one that the state was going to provide funding for.
We do get, I mean, the blueprint does provide additional funding.
Okay.
I mean, I think the challenge we have is if you went back to the state revenue slide, that one, it's broken into these buckets, and each of these types of funding have definitions of the types of activities that fall within them. So that's going to be, we're going to have more accountability around that going forward. So that's going to be, and it's something we haven't really been able to capture previously in how we track our spending. It's also not something that the state really has tracked. So the state is one of the things that the blueprint mandates is that the state rehab their accounting, their financial system by July 1, which in turn will have repercussions for us in following years. They also have to rewrite the financial reporting manual, which was last updated in 2014. And all of that kind of prescribes how we track. And so they're trying to, better align how we're accounting for our locally incurred costs with the outcomes that they're also tracking data-wise with students. And that's right now, we don't have great alignment with that. And so it makes the reporting really challenging for us right now.
Okay, thank you.
So I think there were questions asked during the presentation. Are there any follow-up questions now? And again, we'll be back next month, second reading, another work session so that you go home, look through this, and more questions come up. And so we'll roll our sleeve up and do our best to answer. Thank you.
Why don't we take about a 10-minute break and we'll get started at 7:15, if that's all right with everyone?